Fellas, since this week is UFC Abu Dhabi, I thought I'd go through every single fighter competing on the card this weekend and break them down, break down their skills, what I think they're going to do in the UFC, what they've done already, and then do a little prediction of every single fight at the end of it. So we'll just go straight into it with the first fight, which is Damas versus Tulin. Now, Cedric, he came from the Contender Series. He looked pretty good in the Contender Series as well, and he's got a record of 9-2, with his only losses to Josh Fremd and Nursultan Ruziboyev, which aren't that bad for losses, to be fair. And he was actually scheduled to face Tulin early this year at UFC Saudi Arabia, but it got cancelled due to visa issues. A lot of people think that had something to do with the fact that he was a former criminal and he couldn't travel because obviously got charged for battery early on in his career. But if we talk about his skill set, he's got a very grappling heavy skill set. He likes to engage in grappling and takedown. That's kind of his bread and butter. He showed it on the Contender Series and he's shown it in the UFC so far. And the one fight that he decided to keep on the feet against Ruziboyev, he got KO'd. And Tulin, he hasn't had the best UFC career. He's 1-4 in the UFC, and all four of those losses coming by way of finish. A lot of them to do with grappling as well. So I think if you put a grappler like Cedric Damas against Tulin, who struggles against grapplers, 36 years old and has been finished in 4 of his last 5, and the one win that he actually got a win over is a guy that's not even in the UFC anymore, I'm going to go with Cedric Damas by submission in the second round. I think this is a win that's going to give Cedric Damas back in the winning column and probably kick Tulin outside the UFC. He just hasn't been looking good. Even in his win, it was against somebody that's not even UFC worthy. So I'm going to go with Cedric Damas. Looked good in the Contender Series and so far he's had a good UFC career. Then we have Herbert versus Rolando Bedoya. Now, Herbert's known for 2 main things. The one main thing is known for being Leon Edwards' training partner. He trains with Leon Edwards, and you can kind of tell he trains at the same gym as Leon Edwards via the techniques he does in the octagon. And he also is very well known for getting knocked out brutally by Ilia Topuria. This is one of Topuria's best knockouts. It came in Herbert's home crowd, backed him up against the cage, landed a great combination, and put Herbert out cold. He hasn't had the best UFC career. He's only won 2 fights, started off on a 2-fight losing streak, and he's just not really had the most consistent UFC career. He is a former Cage Warriors champion, which is why he's in the UFC, but at the end of the day, are there many British fighters that, didn't come from Cage Warriors? And his style isn't that interesting. He likes to, go on the back foot a lot. He's got a very technical style, likes holding against the cage a lot, and you can tell he trains with Leon Edwards because he has that high kick. He knocked out Worthy with that high kick, and he also nearly knocked out Ilia Topuria with that high kick. He dropped Topuria with that high kick, so you can tell he trains with Leon Edwards because of that same high kick that he drills. And Rolando, he hasn't had the best start to his UFC career. He's 0-2 in the UFC so far after coming off a massive winning streak, but in his defense, it was against Chaos Williams and Keenan Song, and he didn't look too bad against them, at least not against Chaos Williams, and he has a very unorthodox style of striking. It's a bit weird. He likes switching stances a lot. He's got a very unorthodox way of striking, but if I had to pick one to win, I'm going to go with Herbert. He's more experienced in the UFC. He's got a decent gym around him, and Rolando Bedoya didn't look too good against Keenan Song, so I think Herbert's probably going to back him up against, or not back him up against the cage, but when things get dirty, when things get ugly, he's probably going to engage in a clinch against the cage. But for the majority of the fight, I just see Herbert picking Rolando apart and getting that decision win. I definitely don't see a finish for either men. Then we've got Victoria Dudakova versus Sam Hughes. Now, Dudakova is the woman who actually fought with staph infection and then there was a massive outrage over it. And she also came from the Contender Series as well. She's undefeated, 8-0 as well. So she's had a nice little start to a UFC career. Like I said, came from the Contender Series, and she's actually pretty decent on the feet. She can hold her own on the feet. She's not that bad of a striker, but her bread and butter is grappling. She likes taking it to the mat. She's a pretty decent grappler. She's good at mixing the striking up with the takedowns as well, so she's got really good grappling. And then there's not really much to say about Sam Hughes. She hasn't had the best UFC career. Started off on a 0-3 in the UFC, and she's had a few wins here and there, but she's just not the most consistent. She's lost 2 out of her last 3, so Sam Hughes has not much. I mean, she's tough. She's improved her stamina a lot, and she's not too bad. She can engage in a scrap every now and then, but I just don't think she's talented enough for the UFC. She's got good attributes, but as far as talent goes, I just don't know if the UFC's for her. So I'm going to pick Victoria to win this one by decision. I think she could beat her on the feet if she wants, and I also think she has the option to take it to the ground. And I think Victoria will remain undefeated, go 9-0 after this fight, and maybe this will be the last fight of Sam Hughes' UFC career. Like I said, she's not had the best UFC career. She's already 8-6. If she loses this one, she'll be 8-7, and I'm just not sure she's UFC worthy. But I'm going to pick Victoria Dudakova to win this one by decision. Then we have a really interesting matchup: Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucenic. There's a lot of hype on this matchup. Now, Guram, again, he's had a pretty decent UFC career. He debuted against Gamrot, which is a win that has aged really well in it. He had an absolute scrap with Gamrot, very close fight there. And then he went on a 2-fight losing streak to Ismagulov and Elvis Brennen, which obviously weren't the best in hindsight. And it kind of shows that Guram does need to work on his grappling a lot. And he did get caught by Elvis Brennen, but he does train with Chimaev, and that's kind of what he's known for. He does train at a similar gym to Chimaev. And he's got really good at kickboxing. He's a very crafty kickboxer, hits really hard. He's a very tough guy to put out as well as Guram, and I think it's going to be difficult for Jordan Vucenic. Now, Jordan Vucenic, he's basically been on an absolute streak in Cage Warriors. He's been on a streak in Cage Warriors, especially recently. He's got 4 finishes in a row, and this dude literally just fought last week. He fought on the 20th of July, so he's only just come off a win, and he's back already for this UFC Abu Dhabi card. He's a very grappling-heavy approach. He's a very good grappler. He's got good back takes, and even though I do think Cage Warriors have kind of fed him tailor-made matchups, he's still a really good grappler, and I do think he has potential to be a future star in the UFC, but because it's short notice and he's just fought and he's going to be facing Guram in the UFC, I'm going to go with Guram to win this one by decision. I do think he's going to walk him down and land some really good shots on the feet and basically just win a unanimous decision on Jordan Vucenic, but that's not to say that Jordan Vucenic isn't UFC worthy. I do think the UFC are probably going to give him another chance after this fight because it is on really short notice and it's against Guram after he just fought last week, but yeah, I think Jordan Vucenic needs to take it to the ground if he wants to win this one, but it's easy said than done when you're facing Guram, who's got a really good team around him. I'm going to go with Guram to win this one by decision. I think he's just going to completely outpoint Jordan Vucenic, but if Jordan Vucenic can beat Guram, he's going to make a name for himself and he's got potential to be a big star in the UFC, so I'm going to go with Guram Kutateladze to win this one by decision. Then we've got a lot of hype on this matchup, Shamil Gaziev versus Dontel Mayes. Shamil Gaziev, he's known for one thing and one thing only, which we'll get into in a second, but he was undefeated previous to his loss to Rosenstrike, undefeated in the UFC as well. Well, he was undefeated in the UFC. Kicked off his UFC career by beating Martin Badai, absolutely smashed him, and it's kind of a win that has aged really well because Martin Badai has gone on to beat a lot of other people, so it's a good win for Shamil Gaziev there by beating Martin Badai. Then he had a massive leap in competition when he had a fight night main event in his second fight in the UFC against Rosenstrike. He didn't look too bad in the first round, but eventually his gas tank gave up. He got outboxed by a dangerous striker in Rosenstrike, who is a top contender in the heavyweight division. Got walked down and eventually just quit in the corner because he couldn't take it anymore. So some people said that was a fraud check, but I just think that was too big of a step up. But he's a good wrestler. He's Shamil Gaziev. He's got really good wrestling, and his striking isn't that bad. And I do think we're going to see a very grappling-heavy approach from Shamil Gaziev in this fight. Dontel Mayes, he's not had the most consistent UFC career. He's not had a bad career, but he just can't really seem to put together a lot of momentum. He can't really seem to put together a winning streak. And he has lost quite a few people. He's lost to Rodrigo Nascimento twice. He got submitted by Cyril Gane, which tells you everything you need to know about him. If you're getting submitted by Cyril Gane, that's not a good look at all. He's got this very wild and chaotic kind of style of striking. He knocked out Orlovsky with it. He's got a very wild, unorthodox, but kind of effective style of striking. He's massive for the division as well. And he's got pretty decent grappling as well. Not one of the best grapplers, not a better grappler than Shamil Gaziev, but he can use it to hold his own. But my prediction for this fight is Shamil Gaziev to win this one by decision. I think on the feet it could go either way, but I don't think Shamil Gaziev is going to want to risk it. I think he's going to implement a lot of his grappling that he showed in the Contender Series into this fight. I think he's going to try and aim to take Dontel Mayes down, which I think he can do. Hold him against the cage, make it ugly, and I think he'll do that for the majority of the fight. Dontel Mayes' best chance of winning is in that third round when Shamil Gaziev is the most gassed out, so I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev to win this one by decision, and hopefully the Blob can get a title shot from this fight because he got mocked after that fight with Rosenstrike, man. He's kind of become one of the most mocked dudes in the heavyweight division, so I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev to win this one by decision. Then we've got Muhammad Yaya versus Caio Fernandez. Muhammad Yaya, he didn't look good in his UFC debut. He had quite a bit of momentum coming from UAE Warriors. Debuted at UFC 294 against Trevor Peake, and listen, he came into that fight with momentum. He had a pretty decent kickboxing from what he saw. He was a pretty decent kickboxer, and he was a champion in a different organisation. Came to the UFC, Trevor Peake walked him down, and he just didn't look that good against Trevor Peake. He didn't really look like a good striker. His footwork was really off. He looked really stiff on the feet, and I just don't know if he's UFC worthy, at least from a striking standpoint, and obviously Trevor Peake was able to beat him. And Fernandez hasn't had the most amazing UFC career. He lost his UFC debut to Mark Jacasey, but he came into the UFC with a really, really good head kick KO, a brutal head kick KO coming into the UFC, which is obviously shows a lot about his striking. And then he kind of got the Mark Jacasey treatment, which is Mark Jacasey is a really good wrestler, but he's so boring. And I think he's been cut from the UFC now because of how boring he is. He just holds people down and does nothing with it. So I don't blame them for cutting Mark Jacasey, but Mark Jacasey was able to beat Kyle Fernandez. I'm going to go with Kyle Fernandez to win this one by decision. I think he's a much more dangerous striker than Muhammad Yaya. I think on the feet he looks a lot better than Muhammad Yaya, and Yaya didn't look good against Trevor Peake. So I'm going to go with Kyle Fernandez to just completely outstrike him. I was originally going to go with a third round TKO to Fernandez, but Yaya did look good in a different organisation, and he was a champion, and he had pretty decent technical striking, but that's about it. His footwork is still off, and he is pretty stiff, so I'm going to go with Fernandez to win this one. Then we've got Alonzo Medfield versus Azamat Murzakanov. A fight between two ranked light heavyweights. Alonzo Medfield, he's had a pretty good UFC career in the light heavyweight division. He's had a lot of wins and only a couple of losses in his UFC career. He's been in since 2019 as well. He's a very explosive dude. He's got really good wrestling for the light heavyweight division. He's very explosive on the feet as well. Bit of a chaotic wrestler, but striker, but that's kind of caused him, it's kind of costed him as well. I mean, he got KO'd by OSP from it, and recently in his most recent fight, I think he got KO'd in like 15 seconds against Carlos Ulberg. It was really quickly. He just ran it against Carlos Ulberg and got finished. He was a very wild striker. And he's not that good on the feet now. Azamat Murzakanov, he's undefeated. I think he's the only undefeated light heavyweight right now. And he's looked pretty good on the feet in all of his fights. He seems to hit really hard. He's a really good striker, really good boxer, and he's really good at landing shots, and his accuracy is really good as well. He's quite hittable, but he's a really dangerous striker for the light heavyweight division. But he's super inactive. I think he's like 36 years old, and he hasn't fought since that fight night between Max Holloway and Arnold Allen, which was ages ago. That was like early 2023, and you can't really afford to be taking that much time off when you're at this age. But I am going to go with Azamat Murzakanov to win this one by decision. I think he's just going to walk down Alonzo Medfield. Now, Alonzo Medfield's obviously going to try and implement the grappling, but I think Azamat Murzakanov's grappling base is good enough to keep it on the feet, and he didn't look too good against Dustin Jacoby, did Alonzo Medfield, and he's just come back from a KO. It was only like a few months ago when he got KO'd by Carlos Ulberg. So I'm going to go Azamat Murzakanov. I think he's coming in this matchup fresh. I think he's got much better striking than Medfield, and I think he's going to just walk him down and land a couple of big shots on Medfield. Could even get the finish for all we know, because Medfield's a really goofy striker, but I'm going to go with Azamat Murzakanov to win this one by decision, but it should be a good scrap. Then, talking of good scraps, this is probably the fight of the night. Yoel Alvarez versus Elvis Brennen. This is a really, really good matchup for the lightweight division. I can't wait for this one. Now, Yoel Alvarez, he's had a really good UFC career. He's probably the best, or one of the best unranked lightweights right now. He's finished so many fighters. In fact, he has never won a fight by decision. Every single fight that he has ever won has been by submission or KO. A majority of them coming by way of submission as well. He is the definition of a finisher. He can finish a fight anytime. He's got really, really good jiu-jitsu. His ability to just latch up a submission from anywhere is amazing. He's got some of the best jiu-jitsu in the lightweight division. And his only loss is to Arman Tsarukyan, who's one of the best in the lightweight division right now. He got completely out-wrestled in that fight. And to be fair, I can't even show images of it because it was that brutal. But Arman Tsarukyan battered him with wrestling, but that's his only loss in the UFC. Now, Elvis Brennen, he's very similar. He's got a lot of finishes in the UFC. He's a very dangerous guy. And he's also got a lot of submissions on his name as well. 11 of his wins coming by way of submission, and then 3 of them come by way of KO. He's got a couple decisions, but he is a finisher as well. He also trains at Shute Box with the guys like Charles Oliveira, which shows that he's improving his striking as well. He's got a lot of hands though, does Elvis Brennen. Unlike Yoel Alvarez, Elvis Brennen has really powerful hands. He's got the ability to just shut the lights out at any moment, and he recently had a fight against one of the biggest prospects, Mitabek Orobai, and he made it a really competitive fight against an absolutely relentless grappler in Mitabek Orobai. So even though I think this is going to be an absolute banger, I'm going to have to pick Elvis Brennen for this one. I'm going to go TKO in the 3rd round. I think he's going to have the ability to keep it on the feet. I think Yoel Alvarez is going to have to go for a submission, which he can definitely do. I mean, we just saw his record a second ago, but I think Elvis Brenner's trailing with a really good gym tailor-made for this kind of matchup, and I think he's going to make it in a scrap. I think he's much more dangerous on the feet, and I think he's going to go for that TKO in the 3rd round. It's going to be a bloody fight, but I think Elvis Brenner's going to clip Yoel Alvarez with a shot. And talking of Yoel Alvarez, his last win, Mark Jacasey, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't the best win. I'm pretty sure he was able to latch up a submission, but I think he either eye-poked or got a groin shot on Mark Jacasey, and he tried getting the referee to, just pause it, but then the referee didn't pause it, and then Alvarez just latched up a submission, so it wasn't the cleanest submission either. I'm going with Elvis Brennen. I think he's just better on the feet, and I think he's shown that he's better so far in his UFC career. Then we've got a fight that has a lot about it. Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. I just hope Tony Ferguson doesn't get injured in this fight, man. Not just doesn't get injured, I hope he wins this fight. I mean, we look at Tony Ferguson's career. After that loss to Michael Johnson, obviously went on this massive 12-fight winning streak, beating guys like Donald Cerrone, Kevin Lee, Barboza, Pettis, Dos Anjos, Gleison Tibau. One of the best winning streaks in the UFC. He even won the belt and was in talks of fighting Khabib. I mean, he got scheduled to fight Khabib like 5 times. That would have been crazy, and there was some people actually picking Ferguson to win that. And then it all went downhill. 7-fight losing streak, which is still going on, and if he loses to Kessa, make that 8 fights. He hasn't been the same since that fight with Justin Gaethje. He had a fight with Gaethje. Gaethje battered him, and ever since then it's just been a downfall loss. At first it wasn't that bad because it was like, okay, he's lost to Gaethje, Oliveira and Dariush, and then he loses to guys like Nate Diaz, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green, and it's like, mate, you need to hang the gloves up. Maybe this will be the fight where we see a comeback from Tony Ferguson and we see him finally get back in the winning column, and he's going to be facing Michael Chiesa. Chiesa's also not looked good in his last few. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, 2 of them coming by way of finish. He's got really good offensive jiu-jitsu. His grappling is really good. His wrestling is really good. But one thing I don't understand about Michael Chiesa is, for someone that has really good grappling offense, his grappling defense is terrible. He leaves himself open to get submitted a lot. There have been so many strikers in the UFC that have been able to submit this dude. Jorge Masvidal, Anthony Pettis, Kevin Lee, Luke Holland. These guys aren't even heavy grapplers, and they've all been able to submit this dude. It seems like his worst nightmare is a Dorsch choke. Who am I picking to win this fight? Fuck it, I'm going Tony Ferguson. I'm going Tony Ferguson to win this one by submission. I'm ride or die with Ferguson. I picked him to beat Pimblett, didn't go his way. Who cares? I'm picking him to beat Michael Chiesa. Unironically, I think this could be winnable for Tony Ferguson because we know him as this like crafty guy who used to be able to pull off a finish out of nowhere, and I feel like it's story made. It's the end of his UFC career. It's his final fight. He's facing Chiesa, who's not looked good recently either. Chiesa tends to fall for submissions a lot. Ferguson's best opportunity is latching up a submission, and fuck it, Tony Ferguson by submission. Why not? He lost to Paddy Pimblett, and he was able to survive against Pimblett, who's now ranked. Chiesa's washed. It's Ferguson's most winnable fight in a while. I'm picking Tony Ferguson because why not? Hopefully Ferguson can get this one done, because if not, the MMA world is going to continue into this deep depression. I just hope Ferguson can just retire on a win. I just hope he can retire on a win. I hope he can just beat Chiesa, whether it by KO, submission, decision, and end his career on a high note. I don't want to have to see Ferguson go on an 8-fight losing streak. Tony Ferguson submission. Mackenzie Dern versus Lupita Godinez. Now, the Mackenzie Dern, she's had a nice run in the UFC. She had a good start to her UFC career, getting a lot of wins with her only loss being to Amanda Ribas, but she's got really good offensive jiu-jitsu, does Mackenzie Dern. Her jiu-jitsu is really good. Her ability to latch up submissions is really good. She's got some of the best jiu-jitsu in her division. But with that being said, her striking is god-awful. She might be one of the most goofy strikers. There are just some people in MMA who can't strike. We've had guys like Ben Askren before, and she's one of those people. She has been embarrassed on the feet multiple times. She got embarrassed by Jessica Andrade, Amanda Lemos. Her striking is absolutely terrible. Now, Lupita Godinez, she's also had a nice run in the UFC. She's only lost 1 out of her last 5, and that's to Verna Jandiroba, who's got a lot of hype right now. Now, Lupita Godinez, she can grapple. She's not a bad grappler. She's kind of got it in the back pocket. She's actually quite a good grappler, is Lupita Godinez. But I think her best opportunity of beating Mackenzie Dern is to keep this fight standing. She's a good striker, a much better striker than Mackenzie Dern, and I just wouldn't risk going to the ground with Mackenzie Dern. So I'm going to pick Lupita Godinez to win this one. She's looked much better in the last few fights. I think she's a much better striker than Mackenzie Dern, and if she does keep it on the feet and doesn't try and engage in grappling, I think Lupita Godinez will be able to win this one, and I'm going to say she wins it by decision. Then we have a big fight for the bantamweight division. Marlon Vera versus Davison Figueiredo. Now, Marlon Vera, he got his ass whooped by Sean O'Malley. He got his ass whooped by Cory Sandhagen. And that, I mean, he hasn't really looked that good. I mean, he got the win over Dominic Cruz by head kicking him in the last round while he was getting pieced up earlier in the fight. He had a decent win over Pedro Munoz, but it was a close fight, and Munoz is barely scraping the rankings. And he's going to be taking on Davison Figueiredo, who obviously the former flyweight champion of the world, arguably one of the greatest flyweights of all time. And he's had a good bantamweight career so far. Debuted in the bantamweight division and he absolutely battered, well, I won't say absolutely battered, but he had a really good performance against Rob Font. And then at UFC 300, kicked off the card by submitting Cody Garbrandt in that second round. So he's had a good start to the bantamweight division as Figueiredo. And I'm going to be picking Davis and Figueiredo to win this one by submission in the second. Marlon Vera can't grapple. It's as simple as that. We've seen it multiple times. We saw it against Sandhagen. He can't grapple. And he's not even that good of a striker. He only really becomes dangerous in that 5th round. And this isn't a 5-rounder. This is a 3-rounder. Davis and Figueiredo, I mean, he's looked good in these last few fights in the bantamweight division. Like I said, a former champion. And he's got really good jiu-jitsu. I don't think he'll have a hard time taking Marlon Vera down and latching up a submission. I think he'll do that pretty comfortably. And I think he's going to get it done in the first and the second, and I think even on the feet he can hold his own. I mean, he's very powerful on the feet. He's Davis and Figueiredo. He's fought a lot of strikers recently, and I don't think he'll have too difficult of a time taking Marlon Vera down. I think Marlon Vera is quite overrated for the bantamweight division, and he's just been whooped by Sean O'Malley at UFC 299. That wasn't even that long ago. He hasn't really even had enough time to properly recover. So I'm going to go with Davis and Figueiredo. Marlon Vera's coming back way too quickly. It's kind of a stylistic nightmare against a former champion who's looked good in this division. I'm going to go Davis and Figueiredo to win this one by submission in the second. Then the co-main event. Obviously, Luque versus Diaz is no longer on this card, so we've got Magomedov versus Mikal. Now, Mikal, I kind of feel a bit bad for him. It feels like whenever there's a guy that the UFC just want to give a free win, they feed Mikal to them. It happened with Caio Barallo, happened with Michel Pereira, happened with Kevin Holland, and now it's happening again with Magomedov. Mikal's actually quite dangerous, though. He is a good striker on the feet, and I think he did land a good shot on Kevin Holland when they fought, but he's a good striker. He's got KO ability, and he can hold his own when it comes to grappling. He's not that bad of a grappler either, so he's not just a complete can. He's a step up in competition from the last guy that Magomedov fought. Now, obviously, Magomedov, undefeated as an MMA fighter, really, really good kickboxer as well. Debuted, battered Bruno Silva in his last fight, battered the absolute can, Jolton Lutabach. No, it wasn't. It was Antonio Tricoli. Battered Antonio Tricoli, made it look pretty easy as well. And like I said, one of the best kickboxers. The only thing is, I don't think we're going to be seeing Magomedov for quite a while. Magomedov, he can't fight in America. And considering he's just fought at Saudi Arabia and he's going to be fighting again, unless he makes a quick turnaround for UFC 308, I don't think we're going to be seeing Magomedov fight until minimum July next year. So this is probably going to be the last time we see Magomedov fight for a while, unless, like I said, he comes back for 308. But I'm going to go with Magomedov to win this one by TKO in the 3rd round. Magomedov does a really good job at just breaking people down with his kickboxing, and I think that's going to happen in this fight as well. Mikal's good. He's a step up from his last opponent. He's a step up from Tricoli, but I think Magomedov is way too superior on the feet, and I think he's just going to completely piece up Mikal on the feet, just like he did to Bruno Silva. And in that 3rd round, I think it's going to be too much. He's going to land a nice shot on Mikal, drop him, and then finish him with ground and pound. So I'm going to go with Magomedov to win this one, and then from there, we're going to have to see him get a big fight because he's had 3 fights in the UFC, made easy work of the other 2. And then the main event, Cory Sandhagen versus Usman Magomedov. Really good matchup. I can't wait for this one. This was scheduled to fight actually nearly a year ago, August 5th, 2023. This was supposed to happen, and it's been rescheduled. Cory Sandhagen's so good. I mean, you look at his UFC career, he's had such a good MMA career, and he's one of the best bantamweights in the world, undoubtedly. He's had such a good career. He's one of the best strikers in the division right now, without a doubt. One of the best kickboxers, so crafty, the perfect use of knees and elbows. He's just such a good striker on the feet, and it's going to be very hard for Magomedov to even come close to landing on him on the feet. And you look at his losses in the UFC, he lost to Peter Yan in a competitive fight, and that was when Yan was the uncrowned champion. He had a robbery loss to TJ Dillashaw, and fair enough, he got submitted by Aljamain Sterling, a former champion. And Usman Magomedov, he's undefeated. He's ran through pretty much everybody in the UFC so far. He trains with Khabib. He's got a good gym around him, and we know recently with the Bilal Muhammad win that Khabib seems to be one of the best coaches in MMA. He's had some good wins, and he's shown that he's got some of the most dominant wrestling right now in the bantamweight division. It's going to be very hard for anyone to survive the wrestling of the Magomedov, but the problem is he hasn't fought anyone good yet. To go from Begzat, who debuted in the UFC, by the way, all the way to Sandhagen is a crazy jump in competition, and we've seen this jump before. Ikram Aliskerov did it against Whittaker, didn't end up well. Abbas Magomedov and Imavov did it against Strickland, didn't end well. Shamil Gaziev did it against Rosenstrike, didn't end well. This could happen again. And he got dropped in his last fight in the 1st round by Begzat as well. So I'm going with Cory Sandhagen to win this one by decision. Listen, I don't think Magomedov's going to get throat checked necessarily. I think he does have a bright future in the UFC, but we've seen this multiple times. When an up-and-comer gets jumped way too quickly against a guy like Cory Sandhagen, I just don't favour results. And on top of that, Cory Sandhagen's been training for this matchup for so long. That's why he wrestled against Marlon Vera and Rob Font, because he was in a training camp to wrestle. He's been preparing for Magomedov for so long, and he's got such good fight IQ. I'm going with Cory Sandhagen to win this one by decision. Now, Magomedov could take him down and do what he normally does, keep him down, hold him down, maybe find a submission, but it's way easier said than done when you're facing Cory Sandhagen. So I'm going to go with Cory Sandhagen to win this one by decision, but that are my picks and breakdowns for UFC Abu Dhabi. Let me know your thoughts on this card, what you think is going to happen, your thoughts on everyone fighting, and thank you for watching.